You gotta do it for children. You gotta do it for kin. You gotta do it for the people. If you're ever gonna swim,
everybody,
you gotta drain the swamp.
Yeah, gotta drain the swamp.
Now what's in the mud? You gotta
What's in the
drain
mud?
Swamp. Like lipstick on a hog, you gotta
Like lipstick on a hog, gotta drain that swamp.
Do some cleaning up. You gotta drain the swamp, drain the swamp.
Oh, and them swamp creatures ain't no joke.
That's right. You got to drain them. They're mad right now. Hey, y'all, welcome to Cross Politic on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. After a week of spring break, we all had spring break. That was a friend on Twitter. His dad made that song, wrote the song. That's the chorus.
That's not AI. That's somebody actually.
That's a real dude.
It's a real dude.
I thought I felt
somebody's dad.
I felt some life in that.
That's somebody's dad.
Yeah, there was some life in that.
Gotta drain the swamp.
He gave me permission to play it on the show.
Send us some more music.
So, yeah.
Like lipstick on a pig.
Yep. The opening verse, which is what we didn't play, was really good. The lyrics were
Why didn't we play
I wanted to play the chorus and just get into the show. So
but if it was really good.
Yeah, why are you telling us that? And then not playing it?
Well, that means everyone's got to go find it. It's on YouTube. Drain the Swamp. Google
It's
Drain the
probably a bunch
YouTube
of
Drain the
songs.
Swamp. And subscribe to his channel. He did a great job.
What's the channel?
So
See, Gabe.
I have the link.
Useless.
I'm so sorry.
You forgot how to do
I'm
this.
so sorry.
1 week and he's like,
he doesn't even know how to. Yeah. Come on.
My bad.
Hey, if you haven't yet liked or shared this show, would you please do it? If this is this one of your daily, weekly activities that you love to do, sit down, hang out with us, maybe while you're waiting.
I had multiple people saying, "Hey, I'm tired of reruns from last week. When are you guys going to record again?" I was like, "Today."
What else did your mom
we're
say?
live again.
Hey,
it wasn't my mom. No, I know.
As soon as you like and share the show, you got new content. Just
That's
share and
right.
that show. Maybe tag a couple of friends that you're trying to get them to hang out with us too. Maybe some of them those Baptists that are trying to be covenantal, but they're not really sure where they're going to land yet. Yeah. Anyways, is your website user-friendly, fast, and cohesive? Does your brand clearly communicate who you are and what you have to offer, whether you're just getting your business started or you've been around the block? Mad Bear Creative can help with all your design needs, from brand identity and web design to SEO and marketing materials. As a husband and wife team, Julio and Rosalind are excited to partner with other small but mighty business owners to capture attention, drive engagement, and unlock growth for your business. Visit madbear.io. That's madbear.io to sign up for a free consultation and discover how Mad Bear can help you build your legacy today. We're very grateful to have with us Davis Younts. He's a Christian attorney, former military JAG officer, dedicated to defending religious freedom and constitutional rights. Davis, thanks for coming back on Cross Politic.
Gentlemen.
So all those...
Wait, before the judicial thing,
Really?
there's breaking news.
Really?
Breaking news.
Okay.
we got the other files from Epstein.
So the files are out. JFK files are out.
We heard that part.
Grok, I Googled, I put it into Grok, and Grok said there's no major conspiracy news about it.
I don't believe it.
But even more breaking news is, those astronauts that were in space for 9 months?
Yeah.
They landed literally like an hour ago.
Okay.
And this is a video of their landing here.
Right.
Go ahead and play it.
It's incredible to think that the Dragon capsule just minutes ago was going over 17,000 miles per hour, and now gently coasting to a soft splashdown.
There it goes. There it goes.
And
Boom.
splashdown. Crew 9 back on Earth.
Wow. Listen to this.
And SpaceX Freedom, splashdown. Good main release.
Copy splashdown. We see main chutes cut. Nick, Alex, Butch, Sunny, on behalf of SpaceX, welcome home.
On behalf of SpaceX.
Yo, I ain't gonna lie, that made me emotional. I wasn't expecting to be emotional right now.
Just a little bit. You've been in space for 9 months and you haven't breathed any oxygen from the Earth in 9 months. You haven't touched down and walked in gravity.
I ain't kissed my wife in 9 months.
You were abandoned by the Biden administration.
Yeah.
All for politics.
Yeah.
I the part I heard, I don't know if this is what was tearing you up over there, but on behalf of SpaceX.
Oh, I heard that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's a private company
doing
that just did that good
space
deed.
rescue.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Davis. I know you ain't here to talk about that, but man, I saw you over there about to cry too.
Hey, anytime we demonstrate that the private sector is more effective at doing something than the federal government, then I tear up. So
yes.
that's a win.
Stinger. Where's Bree Stinger
Let's
right now?
go.
Oh,
Let's go.
So clearly, our judicial branch is doing great right now. Speaking of the public sector and the private sector,
so we to set this
You
up, we
interrupt
got a
us again.
quote. Do you know? Do you want to bring in the quote? You got it.
no, I don't know any idea what the quote is,
got
but apparently you know how you want to run this.
Yeah, I do actually today. I was on spring break. I didn't get to do a show. My wife
Yeah.
was tired of me
Go ahead.
talking to her.
Go
and
ahead.
everything.
It's almost like being in space for 9 months.
My
for
wife
you.
was like, "Please do your show."
I'm going to catch up with Davis later. It's
Okay.
fine. We'll be okay.
All right, so there's this like federal judge debacle going on right now with Trump. Trump sent a bunch of illegal aliens, and criminal illegal aliens, like they've done real criminal activity, not
gang members,
all that. Sent them out. Federal judge ordered Trump to bring them back in the middle of their flight.
Right,
and then just today, Chief Justice Roberts commented actually on this issue because Trump was like, these judges need to be impeached, these federal judges.
Yeah.
And so here's what Justice Roberts said today. He said, for more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not the inappropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. So basically, Chief Justice Roberts saying, well, Trump, you should appeal this.
Right.
But the
Hey,
there's a
Davis,
massive legal problem. And that's why we bring Davis in.
Thanks for coming on, Davis. I hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you later. Appreciate it. Go ahead, Davis.
There's a lot here. So a couple of things just to set the stage and understand what's happening, right? We have this federal judge in Maryland who, along with other federal judges, is issuing injunctions to try and stop things that the Trump administration is doing. This case out of Maryland, this federal judge is essentially saying anything to do with U.S. aid, the stopping of funding, firing people, removing people from their positions, any of that cannot be done. It is not authorized. It has to stop immediately. So this just opens the door to a discussion and a debate that we have kind of lost sight of in this nation, but is coming back, and potentially it's coming back for good reason. So one of the things that's happened is, unlike what our Constitution intended, unlike what our founding fathers intended, the Supreme Court declared itself the final arbitrator of what is or is not constitutional. That's not what our founders intended. Our founders honestly thought that the branches would be separate but equal. There would not be a supreme branch, meaning the judicial branch, number one. But number two, they also intended under a federal system that the only real entity with the authority to declare an executive act or a legislative act unconstitutional was the states through the process of nullification, saying not in our state. Not in our state. That was federalism. That's the separation of powers that we have lost sight of, that nobody talks about, is the separation between the states and the federal government. That's all background to say what we have done is created a real problem for ourselves, because when it is convenient for whichever side is making the argument against the Trump administration, what they will do is either, run to Congress, run to the executive branch, or run to the courts, whatever they see fit. And what they're doing, and this kind of shows the absurdity of it, is they're running to all these different federal courts wherever they think they have the best chance of getting a favorable judge who will do things regardless of the law or the Constitution to try and stop the Trump administration. That's a problem that we're facing. So in this particular case, this judge is saying, well, I believe that this is a violation of the appointments clause, because I think Elon Musk is acting like a senior government official that should be appointed and then approved by the Senate. So this is fascinating, right? Because President Trump can just simply come back, and the Department of Justice can come back and say, nope, he's a senior advisor and I have to approve anything he says or does. Therefore, you're wrong. Now what? Now, in this case, arguably, the Trump administration could say, okay, we see your injunction, but we're going to file an emergency appeal, and we're going to be right back at the Supreme Court. And once again, we're going to be addressing an issue of what is the Roberts Court going to do? Obviously, Justice Roberts, and I've said this before, he's sort of a traditionalist. He wants to preserve the power of the court, the judicial branch. He wants to sort of preserve the prestige of it. So we run into the potential scenario where the Supreme Court is going to say, we disagree with the executive. We have a different interpretation of the Constitution in the executive branch. And that's going to raise the question, now what? How do we respond to that? How is our system built? That's where it gets very interesting. I mean, there is a case to be made, and this is the case that President Andrew Jackson made, which was, okay, that's interesting, Supreme Court. You don't have the ability to enforce that. We're going to keep doing what I believe is constitutional and is in the best interest of our country. And if the people of this country who are ultimately sovereign, not the court, disagree with me, they can vote not to elect me my next term. Until then, thanks for your opinion. We'll stand by and keep doing what we're doing.
So you made something that confused my American civics knowledge. The Supreme Court, you said, their job is not to determine something that's constitutional or unconstitutional?
So they invented that authority in a case from 1803. It goes all the way back to this case of Marbury versus Madison, where they invented something that's not in the Constitution called judicial review. So they said, no, we are essentially the final arbiters of what is constitutional or is not constitutional. And in many settings, that's helpful, right? In many settings, the idea that they're going to look at it and they're going to say, okay, we think this is compliant with the Constitution or not. Logically, we could sort of figure out how that makes sense. The problem is when there is a controversy like this, or there is a disagreement over what is or is not constitutional, then it becomes a question of what do we do with that and how is that enforced? And that's quickly what we're going to. That's sort of the crisis, if you will, that's confronting us now.
So then what was the Supreme Court originally set up to do if it wasn't to judge something constitutional or not?
Really, it was set up to resolve conflicts between states. So if Maryland had a border dispute with Pennsylvania or otherwise, that was the kind of thing that would go to the Supreme Court. And then there would be other federal issues. But to be this sort of holy arbiter of what is constitutional and not constitutional was not what the founders had, because ultimately, yes, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, but the sovereignty rests within the people to elect their representatives, and the people can vote representatives that they believe are acting unconstitutionally out of office, or they can rely on their individual state government to protest and to attempt to nullify federal laws. Now, again, there's a lot of history that's gone by. Arguably, that's part of what the Civil War was fought over. The states that would have pushed that authority, you could argue, lost. And so you've had a huge gain in federal authority and power that was not anticipated by our Constitution since then.
Davis, I don't know if you saw, there was an interview circulating yesterday, about a 9-minute clip of Stephen Miller from the White House going at it with a CNN interviewer.
You mean pummeling that person?
Pummeling.
Yeah.
Pummeling.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, that's the word.
Ignorant.
That's what we do here at Cross Pod. We pummeled it.
It was nasty.
Yeah.
But I thought, I mean, he did a phenomenal job of repeating himself over and over again. And he argued, though, that in this case, Article 2 of the Constitution gives the president powers, particular powers, authority as commander-in-chief
with invasions.
To protect the sovereignty of a nation.
Yep.
And he said a district court can no more direct the president in deporting criminal aliens, illegal immigrants, then the district court could direct an aircraft carrier or
turn around
or troop deployment. And actually pressed that question on the CNN interviewer. Are you saying that a district court could tell, can make an order about troop deployment or an aircraft carrier movement or Air Force One, and could never get her to actually answer that question? But he also referenced the Alien Enemies Act, signed into law under Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
So it's like one of the earliest laws signed into law, which explicitly grants the president powers to remove alien
invasion,
immigrants that are in any way suspected of being part of some kind of seditious or treasonous movement. And in fact, in the Alien Enemies Act, it actually explicitly says that the courts are required to actually uphold it. Any acts by the president. It actually explicitly says that courts are required to submit to the president in this area. So I think you saw the interview. I think I saw you nodding, but was Stephen Miller right? Explain maybe briefly, Article 2 and the Alien Enemies Act, if you agree with that assessment.
Yeah, I think he was absolutely right. And what he was talking about, the legal terminology we would use would be justiciability. In other words, does it fall under the authority of courts to even address the issue? And the clear, logical, common sense argument that he was outlining is no, there are certain things that are established by the Constitution as well as by federal law that are within the authority of the commander-in-chief, acting as the commander-in-chief to defend our nation. And under those circumstances, there are certain things that the commander-in-chief can do. And the reality is we may not always like those decisions, but again, the issue we're bumping up against is the idea that there are judges who don't care about the law. They don't care about the Constitution. They merely want to use political power in any way they can, any way see fit to further whatever agenda they have. And again, this is why it matters when we talk about original intent and justices or judges that abide by original intent. We really have a legal system where we have some judges that believe in original intent. And even if they disagree with what's happening, they will follow the law to the best of their ability. They'll follow the Constitution. They'll do their job. We have other judges that their only moral or ethical principle that they have is whatever they believe is right. And we've sort of had some of these discussions about case law and other things, but that's really where we're bumping up against. We're bumping up against judges that don't really care what the Constitution has to say. They don't really care about that. They're just going to find an excuse to do what they think in their own mind, according to their own will is best. And they're going to just sort of define things situationally using situational ethics. And that's what you have going on here because, this judge is saying, well, people aren't getting paid and they're losing their jobs. And there are issues. They're different than the other USAID case we talked about where the argument was work had already been performed. In this case, we're talking about a judge telling the president of the United States continue to send money to foreign countries that will fund terrorist organizations that are going to harm the interests of the United States. And again, I think there'll be an immediate appeal, but this would be one of those things where I think President Trump and his advisors are going to have to look at this long and hard and decide, is this a moment in time where we say, we're going to appeal this? Yes, we'll appeal it, but we are not sending a dime to the Taliban. We're not sending a dime to these foreign terrorist organizations if they're going to continue to harm American interests.
Davis, I'm sorry, I'm just taken back. Do we really have to convince an American judge that we shouldn't be sending money to a Taliban?
Yes.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Right.
I don't even know.
And the same thing with the exporting the legal criminals out of our country. The judge is saying, bring those planes back, bring them back here. We have to convince a judge that too.
Right. And that's where, what Chief Justice Roberts was saying about, we don't impeach judges because we disagree with their opinion. No, but we do impeach judges that are not following the law and that are exceeding their constitutional authority and not abiding by their own oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. So that's the crisis, if you will. And it does go back to a really fundamental question. How do we resolve this? Will judges be impeached? I think some need to be. I think that needs to be a real discussion that we have. And then the other question is ultimately, if there is a fundamental question where, like under the Alien Enemies Act, where it's a legitimate national security interest, there's a question of that. And there's a disagreement between the executive branch, legislative branch, and the courts. What do we do? And again, there is some precedent under Andrew Jackson where the answer is Supreme Court. That's great. You've issued your opinion. The American people can review that. I'm going to continue doing this because I've made an oath to the Constitution. I think you're wrong. I think this is what I have to do. I think it's what I'm obligated to do. And then, the American people will vote in the next election. They'll vote in the midterms and decisions will be made. But that there is an argument to be made. While that doesn't bring stability and it doesn't feel like it gives us some of the stability we might like to have, it is an interesting argument for how these questions should ultimately be resolved politically, because the sovereignty to vote and elect representatives is in the hands of the American people.
But I don't think anybody likes that, Davis, that setup, because first of all, it puts the responsibility on the individual to pay attention to what's going on, what someone has done, and to take it upon themselves.
And your
to
vote
say,
matters.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are not going to allow a congressman to create a law like this ever again. Right. Or people to create laws like that, or judges to operate this way. And so that puts it in our position. And then there doesn't feel like, when just hearing it viscerally, doesn't feel like there's any emergency stops on something that we don't like. Right. Both sides want that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where we want to be able to count on judges to do the right thing. So here's a very personal example. Let's look at COVID, which impacted me as a military officer. I did not obey an order I received from my superior to receive the COVID shot. I disobeyed that order. I did not believe it was lawful. So there was litigation in federal court, and a judge said, we're going to issue an injunction, stop the carrying out of that order, because there is no emergency as to whether or not you get the COVID shot, but there is an emergency as to whether or not you get kicked out of the military. But all the federal judges that issued those rulings put limits on it. They said, that being said, we can't order the military to allow you to put on a uniform. We can't order the military to deploy you to a certain location. We can't order them to put you in a position. We can't order you to put them in command of a ship. Right. Those are outside of our control. What we can do is say, it appears to us that the military is violating the Constitution and the Religious Freedom Restoration Act by the way they processed your religious accommodation and the way they're carrying out this order. So on that very narrow, limited issue aspect of this, we can say, hard pause. Let's resolve this first before anything detrimental happens. But all the courts refused, and you can see it. The federal courts that dealt with the COVID, many of them refused to take any action like restoring someone back to a command position and things like that. So it is possible, it can be done, but it takes judges that are willing to walk through those distinctions and are not just political operatives or just, using situational ethics to decide what they think is best in the moment.
Davis, one of the things that Stephen Miller said in that interview was when he was pressed on whether Trump was like ignoring the order or not, he kind of used this really diplomatic language where he says the Department of Justice has determined that there's no conflict between what we're doing and the order of the justice.
That was weird.
And I'm trying to read between the lines here, and I think what that is sort of diplomatic language for saying you're welcome to your opinion, but we have this right constitutionally. And therefore, that's why it doesn't come into conflict, because it's almost like the equivalent of me issuing an order to Trump. It's like, okay, you're allowed to have your opinion. You're
or
a judge.
The governor of Idaho.
Yeah, like you can have your opinion, but you don't actually have the authority in that lane. And so what you've just said doesn't actually conflict with what we're doing, because we have the full authority to do what we decided to do. And my question is that a right way to read that? And then the follow-up question is that also is there a difference between doing that because you believe you have the full constitutional right to do that and actually following sort of an appeals process in the courts, which is what Roberts is suggesting? Doesn't following an appeals process sort of admit the legitimacy of the order?
Yeah.
Whereas saying there's no conflict, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, doesn't that also sort of subtly deny the legitimacy of the order?
I think it does. I think with the alien enemies and what was done with Tren de Aragua, the convenient out that the administration has was the fact that the planes were already over international waters.
Surprise.
So these are non-U.S. citizens on flights that are no longer under the jurisdiction and no longer in airspace or otherwise the United States. So it's a very diplomatic out to say this federal judge no longer has jurisdiction. They may have before, they no longer do. And that happens, right? There's a lot of different ways where that can happen in cases where a judge loses jurisdiction. So it's a non-issue. To your point, Toby, I think there is a real question there. And I think that's what we're going to see is the Department of Justice through the Attorney General advising the president going to take a stand that this is outside of the authority of this judge. So we're not going to follow it. We're not going to abide by this decision, but also appeal it. There may be ways to do that, right? So you can do that. You can probably figure out a way to nuance that, right? Like a good lawyer, nuance that a little bit so that there is an appellate review. At the same time, I mean, I would be hard pressed. Again, you got to look at the specific payments that are being made. But if we assume that it is true that USAID it has been used, and it looks like it was, to fund fraud and to fund things that are absolutely positively unconstitutional and against the health and safety of the people of the United States, detrimental to our nation, to our people, immoral, unethical, unconstitutional. If that's the case, then I would be hard pressed as an executive to argue that we should pay a single dime while we're waiting for the appeal, regardless of what this federal judge has ordered. So that's where we get very, very interesting. And that's where this starts to get very difficult to work through, and it does, as we address these issues.
And it does seem like maybe there's also slight differences between the USAID situation and the Venezuelan gangs. You have the Aliens Act.
That's easy. I think that's an easy one to say the president has the authority to do that. That seems easy. There's plenty of precedent to say everything that Stephen Miller said, and for the president to do what he did. I think that's much easier than some of these other issues where we're talking about, other pieces of complicated legislation and what authority does the executive have to withhold funds and what does it mean and how long can the president impound funds? All those are other more complicated questions.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much for your expertise on this.
Yeah, always,
obviously, a lot's going to be coming down the pipe with this, and maybe even some challenges to the Supreme Court.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah.
Read those JFK files. I want to know what you think about those JFK files.
We'll do.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, Davis.